If I was sitting in your place, I would call this session the Death Valley session. Here's why. For a couple different reasons. This is where presenters go to die. Okay? Right after lunch.
Yeah.
No. Now it's a little after. I thought we'd be starting around 1. It's hitting 1:30. We're going to get that 2:30 feeling. I won't even be done yet. You're going to be tired. Not to mention the fact, I'm going to pretend like you were trickling in because of lunch, not the fact that your next session was on public speaking. I'm not going to pretend like this is something that you all are just sitting here going, man, we just love speaking in public and we just love when people talk to us about it. So hopefully we're going to make this as painless as possible and as practical as possible today. Okay? It's one of the things I tell my students. If you can walk away from my public speaking course at the end of the semester and go, hey, you know what, that was not nearly as bad as I expected, and if you've learned a little something, then I've done my job. Alright, so as we go along today, I want you to just try to, let me start it this way. It's unrealistic for us to assume that at the end of this hour and 15 minutes that you are all going to walk out and be excellent public speakers, right? If I had 6 months and individual sessions, and we could kind of watch you and videotape you and kind of figure out patterns and trends and tendencies, maybe. But we've got an hour and 15 minutes to address a lot of generalities and try to figure out how can we specify that and say, for our co-ops, how do we become more effective at our messages? And those are going to change depending on who you are and where you serve and where you work and even who you communicate with. All right? So keep in mind that today we're going to kind of breeze through a lot of generalities and try to specify them as much as possible. But a lot of this just takes practice and time. Okay? I'm titling today's session "Just the Facts," man. Not just to emulate the famed Dragnet, right? But because I want us to recognize that when we're transferring, especially safety principles and methods and models, it's not just a matter of information transfer. I wish it was that simple. But we're dealing with a lot of external factors, and we have to kind of overcome those because, and I'm going to call it the human factor. There's a lot of other stuff that's kind of infiltrating. And so it's not just a matter of information transfer. So that's part of the reason why I want to say, hey, we've got facts, we need to communicate those, but how do we do that most effectively? Here are our objectives for today. We're going to summarize and practice skills that produce more effective delivery. So we're going to talk about organization of our material, we're going to talk about content, even though that's actually probably where we're going to spend just the shortest amount of time, and then specifically delivery. All of those painstaking details of eye contact and trying to add vocal inflection, that kind of stuff. Then we're going to do 2 different things that hopefully this is where the practicality of it and specificity of it will come into play. But we're going to have some volunteers, hopefully, and you're just going to present messages that you give on a pretty regular basis in your jobs. And I know that you guys got a lot of homework for me, and I apologize from that. Part of my homework, I'm actually doing this also for a class. I'm a doctoral student at UK. And so you're being videotaped today, so just know that. So anything you can or say can and will be held against you. After
Your volunteers will be trickling in.
Yes, good, by all means. Yeah, actually that would be great. Just tell them over the last half hour you guys have already gone, you're good. It's their turn. I think that's a great idea, Frank. Good job. So we're going to evaluate some job briefings and some other messages just kind of presented by you on a regular basis. And then also just give you the opportunity to present those if you would like, and hopefully some of you volunteer to do that. Let me just tell you a little bit about my journey. I graduated from Cedarville University in 2008, and it's similar to the size of Bellarmine, about 3,500 students. After that, I did a Master's of Communication and Leadership online from Gonzaga, and then also, while I was doing that, did my MDiv from Southern Seminary in Louisville. So I grew up in Ohio and then moved to Louisville, so from football country into basketball country, and let me tell you something about Wildcat fans. You guys are pretty intense. I mean, I'm a Buckeye, right? I don't necessarily love to admit that in too many different circumstances, but I walk into a Kroger in Lexington, and 90% of the people are wearing some sort of blue. I've never seen anything like it. You won't find that in Columbus on a game day. And then now I'm a doctoral student at UK where I focus on instructional communication. My focus is classroom stuff. Like I'm a professor at heart. I love to teach, and so public speaking courses, I love that. I'm weird. I'm a freak. I admit it. I know it's not likely that many people would actually enjoy doing public speaking or teaching it, but I love it. But a lot of my colleagues, peers and professors especially, they focus on risk and crisis communication and health communication. And so a lot of what UK does is trying to figure out how do we take these messages, especially in the areas of like contaminated food, how to avoid those, and what to do in the case of, if you have a food contamination. How do you communicate to people to get out of, an area if there's a natural disaster? A lot of those different types of messages focusing on safety of some sort and health of some sort. So that's where I currently am. I have taught a lot of public speaking courses, and so as I look at public speaking, I really have tried to simplify it as much as possible, because it's not rocket science, right? When David first asked me to do this in July, I think, I didn't even know what an electric co-op was. Okay, I tried to do a little bit of research, and actually you guys got the survey and all that kind of stuff. That was me just trying to figure out what you do, because I legitimately had no idea. With communication and with public speaking, and I'm going to try to hesitate to use public speaking because it kind of comes with a negative connotation. But with communication, you do that on a regular basis. And it's not that it's common sense, but it's that you have daily practice. And so now it's a matter of taking this maybe misshapen ice sculpture and kind of molding down the edges a little bit and saying, how can we refine it? Because you do it. Consistently, you do it. And so we don't have to start from scratch with this, but we need to simplify and say, hey, what are some basic things that we can do? I've also done some consulting and training with Public Finance Resources and the Ohio Association of School Business Officials, where I work with CFOs to try to help them take all, and I'm not a numbers guy, that's why I went into comm, I didn't have to take any math classes. But trying to get them to say, how can we take all of these numbers and figures and work them down into the, the reading level and the intellectual level of the people we're trying to communicate to. So it's all about message effectiveness and simplifying that. And so hopefully we can think in those terms today. Here's what I found, and I promise after today, after you do this evaluation that's on your desk currently, you will have no more homework from me. If you ever see an email from me, you can avoid it if you want to. But here's what I found as a result of the survey. First of all, there are many of you who have over 20 years of experience in your job. So as far as content, you know what you're doing. And I'm not a subject matter expert, by no means. And so my role today is to just kind of take that content that's already there and say, okay, how can we just clarify that? How can we make that a little simpler? We've got a lot of corporate safety administrators, compliance coordinators, risk managers. We have people with some public speaking experience, and I say that in quotes because really that you do it on a more regular basis than you expect. You just don't necessarily think that that's really public speaking. But we have one common goal, and that's safety, right? So we're going to try to just keep that common goal in mind of how do we keep our clients safe, how do we keep people around us safe in our co-op regions, and then also how do we just communicate those safety principles to either co-workers or supervisors. One of the things that I tell my classes all the time is that as you're trying to figure out how to most effectively craft your messages, you've got to understand your primary audience. Now, these came as a result of the questions that I asked you. Your primary audience, majority of you, it's either your employees, supervisors, or clients. So there's your primary audience. Now, the reality with that, though, is that if I'm communicating a message to an employee versus a supervisor, that message is going to look a little different, isn't it? A client is going to want to know different things. Someone living in a house where a power line is down is going to want to know different things than your supervisor. Okay? And so one of the things you have to do, a lot of this is going to be introspective and self-analysis to say, what does my primary audience want? What do they want to hear? Not as if you're translating your message in such a way that's manipulative, but saying, how can I, my employees are looking to me to give them strict, clear guidelines saying this is exactly what I expect of you. Maybe my supervisor is looking for, big picture problem solving solutions. Who knows? But they're going to be looking at it from different perspectives. So nail down who your primary audience is and try to figure out, step into their shoes a little bit and say, what do they want from me and from this message? Here's a perfect example of a communication message that is not effective. I'm going to assume that most of us in here have flown, right? Now, how many of you legitimately would know what to do in the case of a crash? Anyone? Ish? Kind of? You know your seat cushion can be used as a flotation device. I wouldn't know how to put it on, but I know that I can float on it. I know that some sort of mass is going to come down. I should probably take care of mine before the person next to me. But as far as all the other intricacies, you probably don't necessarily know exactly what to do. And yet, every time that you fly, you hear that message. And airlines have tried to, make it, I think Southwest especially, has tried to put in some anecdotes, some jokes, try to make it funny and entertaining. I still walk away from that message going, I don't know what you want me to do. And I'm just going to put my headphones in and read my in-flight magazine because I've heard this before. But I don't really know what you expect of me. My assumption is that that's actually probably a similar case with you guys as you're trying to articulate these safety principles. That you're saying this message over and over and over again, and we can kind of assume that people know what to do. But the reality is they probably don't. Here's our agenda. We're just going to go over some basic fundamentals, and then we're going to practice, and then we're going to evaluate that practice. That's it. That's our agenda today. I'm going to blow through this, but this at least gives you a little bit of background. In the 1940s, it's a long time ago. In the 1940s, Shannon and Weaver came up with a communication theory called the information theory. And not to bore you with the details, because really none of us need to know them, me included. But Shannon and Weaver basically said that our primary objective should just be transformation of information. And any problem that we have can be solved with a loss of reducing information. So all we have to do is just say, hey, this is what you need to do. And what they said was communication is linear. So what that means is me, the source, sends a message through some channel to the receiver, communication done. Now, is that the reality of the situation? Absolutely not. Why? We are not a linear people. Feedback, noise, something that distracts us from the message is happening at all times. So here's what I want you to do before we do anything else, and this is where you need to interact with me or we're not going to get as much benefit out of this as we can. What are some human factors that you deal with on a regular basis? What do you believe stops people from listening to your messages? What do you think?
Bull crap.
What do you think?
Cell phone.
Cell phones, okay? Absolutely cell phones. What else?
They've had to hear the message before. It's a mandated message that they've had to hear before.
Okay, so repetition, right? What else?
Fatigue.
Fatigue, absolutely. They're just tired of it. Or they're tired. Who knows?
Content of the subject.
What was it?
Content of the subject.
Okay, content of the subject. And we can approach that from a lot of different ways, can't we? It's either maybe that the content is boring, that the content is a little too complex, or maybe it's that the content is a little too simplistic and we just tune it out because we think we know that already. What else? Human factors. What do you think?
They may have something going on in their own life that's distracting.
Absolutely. Rarely do I walk into it. Now, let me tell you something. 18 and 19-year-olds at 8 a.m. is not necessarily the group that I would prefer to interact with. But I have a ton of 8 a.m. courses. But usually, if I recognize that one of my freshmen is asleep, or is sluggish, or is apathetic, I can almost always attribute that to lack of sleep because they're in college and college students don't sleep anyway. But there are a few times where there's just something going on in their personal life that they just tune me out. And it's not my fault. I can't necessarily do anything to make them come back, right? And listen, there's just something deep down that's going on. I think it's great. What else? What other human factors do you can think of?
Stress.
Stress, absolutely. Now, we can think of probably 100 more, right? But I say this just to remind you of the audience that you're interacting with. Usually there's something behind the scenes going on. Whether it's a hidden agenda, whether it's hidden issues going on, whether it's just fatigue and we just don't want to listen. Or now we have to contend with technology and try to figure out how to do that. I mean, I think my survey was a prime example to you of, hey, here's something else for you to do. Some of you did it, and I appreciate that. Some of you just said, oh, I'm not even going to pay attention to this email. Some of you tried, and the link didn't work. So, there you go. A lot of human factors involved in that. Ways to overcome the human factor, though, are relatively simple. And if I was going to say that public speaking is like a house, I think that there are 3 pillars that if we can master these, we master our message. and that's content, and it's organization, and it's delivery. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about content. That's going to come a little bit more into play in the practice and evaluation part, but I'm not a subject matter expert, you are. And so we trust that either your supervisors or you are communicating clearly the content to whoever you want to communicate that content to, that it's easily understandable. Content's going to vary, especially for you, depending on the situation. But we have to continue to ask ourselves, hey, what are my primary messages? What am I trying to relay on a pretty consistent basis? If you feel yourself communicating the same message over and over and over again, then maybe we need to figure out a clearer way to articulate that message. But this is where that self-analysis aspect comes into play. Being able to say, what exactly is my primary message? Of that content, what exactly do I want them to know? What is of the utmost importance and what's just filler? That's part of what you have to ask yourself when it comes to this content. Sometimes there are regulations that say, hey, you have to say everything. We get that, right? Where you have to lay it all out. Sometimes you have a little bit of freedom, and you can kind of focus on the main thing, and you can keep the main thing the main thing. Next pillar of this house is organization. This is really where you can help your audience, whoever that is, whether it's a small group, whether it's a boss, whether it's a client, who knows. This is where you can really help your audience and bring them along on this communication journey. All organization is it's saying, what direction are we heading? Now, in public speaking, you'll have like a basic outline, right? You'll have an intro, you'll have a preview statement where you say, hey, this is what we're going to be talking about. Then you have first main point, some sub-points, transitions, into a conclusion where you summarize everything. With you guys, that's not necessarily realistic. We would hope that there's some semblance of that, because that's just conversation to a certain extent. But for you, maybe it's a matter of being a little more repetitive on the main things. Maybe it's a matter of saying, hey, listen, as a result of this meeting today, here are the 3 things that I want you to know. And you say, number 1 is this. Now, we've just covered this particular aspect. Here's what we're going to talk about next. And then you go back at the end of your meeting and you say, listen, did everyone get the 3 main points? Like today, what do I want you to know? There's a human factor. It's not just transfer of information. And we can do 3 things to make our messages more effective. Have better, firmer content, organize it well, and be effective at our delivery. That's it. There's your main message from me today. So you can help your audience along with that by using transitional phrases, by being a little repetitive at times. Just depends on what they need. And you will know your audience much better than I will. So that's where that self-analysis comes into play again. What does our primary audience care about? That's a pretty significant question that we have to just keep reminding ourselves of. And that actually takes a lot of patience and grace on our part as communicators to step back into the shoes of our clients or our supervisors, co-workers, employees, figure out what they want. We're still businesses. And so you still have people who are either trying to move up in the company or trying to get a different position. So you have to kind of deal with that and work through that as well. This is my basic roadmap. And this is why I'm saying this is pretty simple. Tell me what you're going to tell me. Tell me what you told me. That's it. If I were to craft any message, that's where I would start. What are you going to tell me? Where are we going to go? And then take me there, and then summarize it so I can have it beat into my brain again. It's crazy. Even songs kind of do that, right? Like you have the chorus, they're repeating it, and then that's kind of why songs get stuck in your head. It's that repetition, 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 repetition. This is probably, delivery is probably the third aspect, and it's the one that we kind of focus on a lot, because it seems to be, on the surface at least, a little easier to fix. The problem is that we've all developed bad habits over the last 20 to 60 years, who knows. And so what we have to do now is you have to do a little more self-analysis and say, what do I do? And this is part of the reason why I had you fill out those surveys, is just to figure out, like, what are some issues? So before we do anything else, I want you to think back to just effective communicators. What do they do well? What do effective communicators do well? What do you think?
They get your attention, they hold your attention, and they shut up before they lose your attention.
There you go. I think that's a great way to say it. Hopefully shut up before they lose your attention. right? It's a little bit of charisma, a little bit of energy, hopefully. What else?
Like you said, they give you a message, they give it to you easily understood, rather quickly,
Okay,
not to wear you down, not to take all afternoon to do it.
good,
Or
absolutely.
forever.
All right, what else?
I think you have to, the audience has to feel like you're connected with them, you're empathize with them.
How do we do that?
Such as studying the co-op world, you find out about them. A preacher does it. He's walked in their shoes.
Yeah, you know your people, right? Good. What else?
Is it the voice modulation so that you're not always talking like this?
Yeah, voice inflection. And let me tell you something. As a result of that survey, it seemed to me that voice was the thing that a lot of you struggle with. I saw a lot of just, you know, hey, I don't feel like I'm very good with dialect. I don't feel like I'm very good with pronunciation or articulation. I'm from the heart of Appalachia. I grew up in southeast Ohio. And so I grew up with a lot of dialect around me. My grandma especially has, I actually didn't know the proper way to pronounce orange until I was 12. Because I'd grown up with orange. And I'd grown up with Washington, D.C. Okay? And so there are ways that we can do that. And I want to kind of focus on this now that, is it Martha? Is that it? Now that Martha's kind of brought up this voice and vocal inflection mentality, there are ways to overcome dialect and articulation and pronunciation. Especially now with the internet, you can type in different words and it'll have somebody, some robot voice who's kind of going on over that with you. Helps significantly. Like I still struggle with rural. If you had a gun to my head, I probably wouldn't be able to say it. But being able to just listen to that word over and over and over again and hearing just a proper pronunciation would help significantly. And I will tell you this, because I did notice that a lot of people, at least according to our survey, were worried about dialect. Depending on your circumstances, it's actually not that big of a deal. In the circles that you run with, you're probably going to run into people with a similar dialect. Now, when I first moved to Kentucky, everybody said, man, listen to that guy's northern accent. I thought, northern accent? From Ohio? What do you mean northern accent? I didn't even notice. Because everybody in Ohio had the exact same accent as me. So, it was what it was. Now if I, go to Minnesota, everybody's going to sit there and say, man, where's that guy from? The South? No, I don't think so. It's crazy. But you deal mostly with people who are from Kentucky. Which means your dialect is not necessarily a hindrance. It just depends upon the context that you're in. Okay? What else? So we got voice, which I think is great, and even just that vocal inflection of adding, certain volume, being louder and softer depending on our content. Changing our rate, the amount of words that we say in a certain amount of time. Pace. What else? What do effective communicators do? Body language. Nonverbals are huge, aren't they? Let me tell you something. And even you guys in the back kind of giving me a little body language right now. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean anything. It could. But the arms crossed usually means we just got to get this. We're just trying to survive. We're staying afloat. Right? But nonverbals, how I stand, how I present myself, how I dress. Let me tell you something. When I got out of the car today, I had a tie on. Soon as I saw a couple of the KAEC, employees and a couple of the co-op members walk in without their tie and in a hoodie and just a button up and some jeans, I thought, well, that's it. Got rid of the tie. And didn't walk in with my sport coat on. Okay? So that's just part of that. That's just the nonverbal behaviors that we just recognize as we're doing this audience analysis. What else? One pretty crucial one you haven't mentioned yet.
Eye contact and the way that you do your eye contact.
Absolutely. Tim mentioned just that empathizing with our audience, engaging with them, connecting with them. If you're not looking at them, then they're not going to recognize that you're even speaking to them. Eyes, I used to, as cliche and oddly romantic as it is, but eyes are the window to the soul. And so if you're not engaging with your audience and giving them eye contact, hey great, our volunteers are here. Excellent. All right, we can get started. But if you're not giving eye contact, if you're not engaging with them, then we've lost. Because it doesn't feel like there's some connection. All right? These are great thoughts. And what I want you to do is for the rest of the time now, you've heard enough from me. now it's your show. So what we're going to do is we're going to try some of these messages, and we're going to kind of cast this back onto you with a little bit of facilitation from me to say, what have these people done effectively? What could they do to communicate this message a little clearer? So if you are one of our willing volunteers, get ready. Do you have anyone who wants to go first? Now, as you think through messages that, hopefully some of you brought some prepared messages. Either a job briefing or something that, great. Either a job briefing or something. But think through, if you didn't bring one and you would still like to try this, just think through a message that you give on a pretty regular basis. Okay? Frank, you want to go first?
We're involved in Project ID.
Okay.
And we have ID kits that we take to kindergarten students.
Mm-hmm.
We go into the classroom, we take their fingerprints, and we take a DNA sample. Now, little people tend to be somewhat frightened of things. So the teacher may tell them something, but they're still sitting there like this. And then I ask if I can speak. And what I do is, "Hi, everybody. I'm Frank Rockman, and I'm from Farmers RBCC. And you know what? We're going to do something special today. Now, how many of you can raise your right hand and do that? Can all of you do that? Do it for me. Do it now. Okay, that's very good. Can you do that with your left hand? Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Now, can everybody just make a big old face like this? That's wonderful. Now, guess what? We're going to take Magic Ink and we're going to put it on your fingers and we're going to touch them to the paper. And you're going to leave your fingerprints. And you're going to be able to see, and there's no ink and no mess, and we're not going to have to clean up. And then I'm going to ask you to make that face for me. I'm going to take a Q-tip, and I'm going to tickle inside that cheek, and I'm going to tickle inside that cheek. I'm going to put it in the envelope. Now, is everybody good to go on that? All right?
Good. Thank you, Frank. All right. Now,
It scares me.
Well, we do about 1,000 kids a year.
okay, let's talk about Frank's presentation. Who is Frank's target audience? Children. Kids at home. That's right. Frank walks into a staff meeting doing that. We might have some issues. So we've got Frank's target audience. What do family reunion? What do kids genuinely care about? What do they need to hear? What is it that will engage with them? What do you think? Upbeat. Energetic. Was Frank energetic?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty energetic, right? What else?
Action.
Actions. A lot of this, right? Getting them to participate, too. Okay? Oh. Would you do me a favor and look up the current status of the Tennessee football coach job hunt? I'm a little curious. My wife went to Tennessee. She's a big fall. I know, I don't...
Strong's not gonna take it.
No, I know. Hey, whoa. Let's close the can. Sorry, we're going to close the can of worms. Okay, what else did Frank do well?
He took the fear away.
Okay, in what way?
Well, he just explained, the ink on the phone. Sometimes that can be scary if you don't know.
Okay.
The swab inside the cheek, he kind of made it where, it's like, it's fun, it's not, you don't be scared, it's kind of that type of thing.
Yeah. Took away the fear of the unknown, right? Made it fun. Good. Excellent.
I think everybody wants to be part of a group. Nobody wants to be singled out. He was inclusive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Man, that's huge. That's huge. Especially when you're engaging with employees and coworkers. Trying to get them all on the same page and casting a vision, right? Whether it's a vision of safety or a method or procedure. Because probably, I don't know a ton about your messages, but I would have a feeling that a lot of your messages are not just humdinger, man, can't wait to just hear what this guy has to say next. But trying to cast a vision and say, hey, why is this important? Why does this matter? Remembering the core of why your employees and why you do what you do, I think is really important. Good. What else? Any other thoughts on Frank?
I was told early on in my career, speech career, that when you're dealing with smaller children, open your eyes especially wide, because they are not as afraid. Because I was told that, and I've always done that when I deal with small children.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Kind of makes you a little more welcoming, right? Good. Okay, any other volunteers? Anybody have a job briefing or any regulatory message that they send on a pretty consistent basis?